The boy I'd raised for 15 years was standing right in front of me. His small hands gripped an old phone. His eyes were red and swollen. And yet, his voice still trembled as he spoke. "Uncle, Mom told me not to call you Dad anymore, because you don't deserve it." I froze. The room felt like it turned to ice. Every sound, cars outside, the fan spinning, just vanished. All I could hear was my own heartbeat, pounding hard, so hard it felt like someone was squeezing it in their fist. 15 years. I'd done everything, just to hear him call me Dad. And now, in a single moment, with a single sentence, everything shattered like smoke in the wind. I turned to Linda, the woman I'd trusted more than anyone. She stood there, leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed, her cold eyes staring straight through me. Then she spoke. Her voice was calm, almost gentle, but every word cut deep, like a knife twisting in my chest. "Did you really think you were his father? You were just a stand-in. Stop pretending to be noble." Her words struck like lightning. My knees buckled. I fought to stay standing on the cold floor. I looked at the boy, the child I'd stayed up all night for when he was sick, the child I worked myself to the bone for, just to put food on the table, to buy him little toys. But he kept his head down. His eyes glistened with fear. And he didn't deny what his mother had said. Maybe you're wondering, how did it come to this? What did this man do wrong? Is he really not the boy's father? I asked myself those same questions, hundreds of times, on those long, sleepless nights, when the house was drowning in that heavy, suffocating silence. And then, one night, I overheard Linda on the phone, with a man I'd never heard of. That's when it hit me. I'd never truly belonged here. If I hadn't been standing behind that door that night, if I hadn't heard the truth for myself, maybe even now, I'd still believe I was the lucky man who had it all. But it was all a lie. 15 years ago, I was a broken man. My fiancée had died in a car accident, leaving me stranded in an endless stretch of empty nights. I thought I'd spend the rest of my life alone. No family, no second chance. Then Linda came along. She brought with her Mark, a little boy, just 2 years old. His round, dark eyes stared up at me, and the way he clung to his mother's hand, like he was terrified she might let go. Linda told me Mark's father had walked out on her when she was pregnant, left her and the boy to fend for themselves. I looked at them, two fragile souls, and I saw my own loneliness staring back at me. When Linda and I got married, I made myself a promise. "Thomas, even if Mark doesn't share your blood, you'll love him as your own. You'll be the father he deserves." And I kept that promise. I worked 14-hour days to provide for our family. I taught Mark how to ride a bike, stayed up all night at his bedside when he had a fever, carefully wrapped his birthday presents, and I was always the loudest voice in the stands when he played soccer. The first time Mark called me Dad, I felt like the happiest man alive. But now, when I look back, I wonder if Linda ever meant it, or was she just playing the part of the grateful wife? About a year ago, things started to crack. Linda would sigh every time I talked about saving up for investors. "You're always thinking about money. Don't you ever get tired of being so boring?" Her voice was cold. The warmth in her eyes, gone. Mark changed too. The boy who used to run into my arms when I came home from work, now barely looked up. "Hey, Uncle," he'd mumble. I tried to hold on. I bought basketball tickets, took time off work to attend his school concert, got him the phone he'd been dreaming of. But everything I did hit a cold, unyielding wall. And then, one night, on my way down the hall to get a glass of water, I heard voices whispering in the bedroom. "I'm tired of pretending, Mom. I don't want to call him Dad anymore." It was Mark's voice, breaking with emotion. Linda answered, her tone calm. So calm it chilled me to the bone. "You don't have to pretend anymore, sweetheart. He was never your father. He's just a stand-in. And soon, we won't need him at all." I stood frozen outside the door, my hand clenched so tight, I didn't even notice the blood. I stood frozen outside the bedroom door. My breathing was ragged, like I'd just run a marathon. He was never your father, and soon we won't need him anymore." Linda's voice was cold, so cold, it cut straight through me. I bit down hard on my lip, fighting the urge to storm in and demand answers. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat alone in the garage, a beer bottle trembling in my hand. The dim neon light flickered, casting my hollow face in the cracked side mirror of the old truck. Why? I gave them everything. I sacrificed my whole life for them. And this is what I get in return. In the days that followed, I still tried. I still drove Mark to school, still cooked dinner, out of habit more than hope. But the air in the house felt frozen. Mark would whisper to Linda when I walked into the room. And Linda? She looked at me like I was some stranger squatting in her home. One evening, I set a small birthday cake on the table, hoping, praying, we could sit together, just this once. "Do you want to blow out the candles with Dad?" I asked, forcing a weak smile. Mark glanced at Linda, then dropped his head. Linda folded her arms, smirking. "Stop embarrassing yourself, Thomas. He's old enough to know you're not his real father." I froze. The lighter slipped from my hand, clattering against the table, then hitting the floor with a dry, hollow clink. Mark stayed silent. Linda's eyes bore into me. That look that said, "You mean nothing in this house." That night, I lay in bed. Linda had her back to me, phone in hand, her fingers dancing across the screen. The glow of her phone lit up my empty eyes. And then, I caught a message flash across her screen. "When will you wrap this up? I'm tired of pretending." I turned my face to the wall. Tears spilled onto my pillow. For the first time in my life, I felt invisible, like a ghost in the very family I'd built with my own blood and sweat. But then, in the dead of night, a thought hit me. "Enough, Thomas. You've endured long enough." The glow of the laptop filled the dark room. I typed each word slowly, deliberately. "Divorce lawyer." My fingers trembled, but my eyes were no longer wet. There was only one thing left in them now: resolve. They would regret ever pushing me out of their lives. I don't even remember how many times I typed divorce lawyer into Google that night. My fingers trembled. Sweat pooled in my palms, like I was about to do something wrong. For 15 years, I'd gotten used to enduring. I swallowed every bitter word, every contemptuous glance, just to keep this family together. But when I looked in the mirror, I saw a gaunt man staring back. His eyes were hollow. That wasn't me anymore. The next morning, Linda wasn't home. Mark was already at school. The kitchen felt cold. The stale scent of leftover coffee lingered in the air, just like the staleness that had settled into this house. I called a lawyer I'd found online. His voice was calm, as if divorce was just another piece of paperwork. But every word that came through the phone made my chest heavier. "You need to be prepared, Thomas. Divorce isn't just paperwork. It's a battle, especially when there's property and a child involved." I gripped the phone tighter. My fingers turned white. A battle? I'm so tired of fighting. But if I don't stand up this time, I'll lose everything, my dignity, and what's left of myself. That afternoon, I came home earlier than usual. A strange car was parked in front of the house. My heart started pounding. I walked slowly toward the window, pulling the curtain back just enough to see inside. In the living room, Linda was sitting across from a young man. His hair was slicked back. His suit screamed money. They laughed. Linda's hand rested lightly on his arm. Pain shot through my chest. I turned to walk away. But then I heard it. "He's so stupid he actually thinks he's the backbone of this family. Soon, this house will be ours." Linda's voice, cold, dripping with contempt. The young man smirked, his eyes flicking toward the window. But he had no idea I was standing there, watching. I froze. It felt like a boulder was crushing my chest. All those nights, Linda had whispered to me, "I'm grateful you gave me and Mark a family," now echoed in my mind like some cruel joke. That evening, when Linda left to meet a friend, I opened her desk drawer. Papers spilled out, a house sale contract, bank account copies. And then I saw it. A divorce form. Unsigned. every line neatly filled in. House. Linda. 100% ownership. I just stood there, not because of the house, but because 15 years of sacrifice was reduced to this cold piece of paper. The next day, Linda threw a little house party. She invited some friends. I was asked to help out, like some quiet servant in my own home. As I carried a tray of wine glasses, Linda's laugh rang out. "Thomas, he's just a placeholder. I can kick him out of this house any time I want." The room burst into laughter. I stood there frozen. The tray in my hands trembled. A man clapped me on the shoulder. "Hey, Thomas, women, you know." "Don't take it to heart." I forced a smile, swallowed the fire burning in my chest. That night, I sat alone in the garage again. The neon light buzzed overhead, casting its sickly glow over my hollow face. Should I forgive? Should I keep trying? No. Love is for those who know how to value it. I opened my phone, downloaded a recording app. I stuck it under the dining table, the spot where Linda always made her late-night calls. I placed a small camera in the corner cabinet, angled perfectly at the living room. I used to be blindly trusting, but from now on, I would see everything. That night, Linda walked into the room. She glanced at me, her lips curling into a smirk. "You're still here, Thomas? How pitiful." I didn't respond. I just stared at her, the way a man looks when he's finally buried his own dream and is ready to destroy someone else's. That night, for the first time in months, I slept soundly. 3 days passed. Linda still walked through the house like she already owned everything. She laughed with Mark, and every now and then, she'd glance at me with that same smug look, the look of someone convinced they've already won. But what Linda didn't know, I wasn't the same Thomas she thought she had broken months ago. That night, Linda said she was going out to dinner with her girlfriends. The sound of her heels echoed across the wooden floor, each step pounding against my chest. The door clicked shut. I opened my laptop and played the audio recording from the hidden mic under the dining table. Linda's voice came through, cold. So cold it made my skin crawl. "I still can't believe he hasn't suspected a thing. What kind of idiot thinks he deserves to be a husband? Or a father?" My chest tightened. Cold sweat ran down my back. Then came another voice. "The young man in the suit from the other day. Don't worry. He'll be out of the picture soon. Everything we want will be yours. As for the kid, he doesn't need him either." I sat there in the dark, my hands clenched so tight, my knuckles turned white. My eyes stayed fixed on the screen. My heart was pounding, but deep inside, a strange feeling started to rise. No longer the pain of a husband betrayed, but the rage of a man finally ready to stand after years of being trampled. 15 years. I gave up my youth, only to end up the fool in their story. But this time, things wouldn't end the way they thought. The next morning, Linda left early. I drove to the lawyer's office. But this time, I didn't just ask about divorce papers. "Do you want us to dig deeper?" the lawyer asked, his eyes sharp. "I want everything," I said. "Every secret she's hiding, every move she's making. I need to know before I sign anything." That afternoon, I called Brian, an old friend, now a private investigator. "You know what?" Brian said, his voice laced with a bitter laugh. "Your sweet little wife just signed a contract to sell the house, under her name only. Right now, at a cafe downtown." I gripped the phone tighter, knuckles white. A bitter smile tugged at my lips. She really thought she could kick me out of the game without me ever knowing. That night, with the house cloaked in darkness, I installed another small camera in the living room, right where Linda liked to sit with her phone. As I crouched to tuck the device into the cabinet corner, a sound came from the stairs. I spun around. Mark stood there. His wide eyes stared at me. "What are you doing?" he asked softly, but it was enough to send my heart racing. I swallowed hard, forcing my voice to stay calm. "Oh, just fixing some of the network cables." "Yeah." Mark stared at me for a moment, then turned and walked back to his room without another word. I exhaled sharply, my chest heavy with sorrow. I thought back to the first time he'd ever called me Dad. Now, the distance between us felt so wide, I didn't know if I could ever build a bridge across it. Later that night, The camera recorded Linda and the young man sitting in the living room. Linda swirled a glass of red wine in her hand, her eyes glittering with triumph. Everything's falling into place. Once he signs the divorce papers, the house and the money will all be mine. The man leaned in close, his voice steady, almost a whisper. Don't forget my cut. 60% of the house money belongs to me. Linda froze. Her wine glass trembled. 60. We agreed on 40. You misheard, he said sharply. And don't make me repeat myself. His cold gaze cut into her. Linda's shoulders stiffened. She fell silent. So, in the game she thought she was controlling, she was nothing more than another pawn. I shut off the screen, leaned back in my chair, and for the first time, a faint smile crossed my lips. No longer one of pain. They had no idea. I'd seen everything. And this game was only just beginning. Ever since I learned the truth, I started seeing everything with different eyes. Linda still moved through the house with that same air of triumph, occasionally glancing at me like I was nothing more than an old chair waiting to be thrown out to the curb. But she had no idea. The man she once looked down on had already started pulling the strings. I met Brian at a small cafe on the edge of town. He slid a thick file across the table. The photos inside made my blood run cold. Linda and her lover, hand in hand, walking into a luxury hotel. The way she looked at him, the smile she gave him. Each image felt like a knife driving deeper into my chest. But this time, there were no trembling hands, no tears burning my eyes. I'd run out of tears for Linda the night I learned the truth. What's your next move? Brian asked cautiously. I won't let her take anything, I said, my voice steady. Not the house, not a single dollar, and she sure as hell isn't taking my son. That night, Linda came home late. I sat in the living room, a glass of wine in my hand, eyes fixed on the TV as if I was lost in the news. But in reality, I was waiting for her. The door opened. A cloud of unfamiliar perfume followed her in, each step of her heels echoing across the wooden floor. She looked at me and smirked. You're still sitting here? Pathetic. I met her gaze calmly, though deep in my chest, a fire burned hotter than ever. You know, Thomas, she said, you're like an old piece of furniture. Useful at first, but once it's lost its value, you throw it out. Even Mark. He's tired of calling you Dad. Yeah. My chest tightened, but I kept my face still, eyes locked on hers. I set my glass down gently. My voice came out low and steady. Maybe you're right, but you should remember, not every piece of furniture is so easy to throw away. Linda paused for a moment, then turned and walked upstairs without another word. The next morning, once Linda left the house, I drove to the lawyer's office. You said she's already signed a contract to sell the house in her name. I want to block it. You need to act fast, Thomas. If you wait too long, everything will end up in her hands. And his. I signed a stack of papers, my grip firm. Inside, I made myself a silent vow. I will not let her take me down again. That evening, I installed another small camera in the living room, right where Linda liked to sit with her phone. As I crouched down, a soft sound came from the stairs. I turned. Mark stood there, his wide eyes fixed on me. What are you doing? He asked quietly, his voice small but enough to make my heart race. I took a deep breath, forcing calm into my voice. Oh, just fixing some network cables. He stared at me for a moment longer, then turned and walked back upstairs without another word. I let out a shaky breath, my heart pounding in my chest. Later that night, I watched the camera feed. Linda sat in the living room, the young man in the suit standing beside her, his hand resting on her shoulder. Don't let him suspect a thing. Just a few more days, and it'll be over. Are you sure? Linda asked, her voice faintly trembling. You really think I'm doing all this out of love? He replied, with a cold smile. A flash of something sharp crossed his eyes. Linda fell silent, her shoulders stiffening. For the first time, I saw a flicker of unease in her expression. I leaned back in my chair, eyes locked on the screen. Rage clawed at my chest, a monster screaming to be let out. But I held it back. I'd seen enough. It was time for them to taste the pain I'd been swallowing all these years. I picked up my phone, my voice calm, but colder than it had ever been. "Brian, it's time. Start the plan." The phone vibrated softly on the table as Brian answered. On the other end, his voice was low and firm. "Understood. I'll start tonight. Are you sure about this, Thomas?" I took a deep breath, my voice rough but unwavering. "More sure than ever. I've let them back me into a corner for far too long." I set the phone down, my eyes scanning the tiny apartment I'd just rented. The room was bare, just an old wooden table, a laptop, and a few heavy curtains. Not far from here, Linda still walked freely through the house I'd poured my sweat into, thinking she had everything under control. But this time, I wasn't the one being pulled by the strings. The next morning, I left a note on the kitchen counter. "I have to go on a business trip for a few days. Don't wait up for me." I shoved a few clothes into a suitcase, threw it in the trunk, and drove off while the sky was still gray with dawn. But I didn't go far. I stopped at an apartment less than 5 minutes from the house, close enough to watch everything Linda was doing. That night, I opened my laptop. The hidden camera feed flickered to life. Linda sat cross-legged on the sofa, gently swirling a glass of wine in her hand, her red lips curved in a triumphant smile. The young man in the suit sat across from her, his eyes glinting with calculation. "You said everything's almost done. How much longer?" Linda asked, her voice eager. 3 more days. When he comes back, he just needs to sign the papers. Then, he's out of your life." Linda smirked, her eyes sharp as a blade. "He has no other choice. Even Mark. He's stopped calling him Dad." My chest tightened. My fingers trembled slightly over the keyboard, but my eyes were cold, numb to everything. The next day, I sent an anonymous email to Linda's inbox. The subject line was simple: "Do you really trust him?" Attached was a video clip of the young man pressuring Linda to increase his share from 40% to 60% of the house sale. That evening, the camera feed showed Linda leaping to her feet, slamming her phone onto the table, her face pale, her lips quivering with rage. "You think I wouldn't notice? You're trying to cheat me too?" she screamed, her voice thick with venom. The young man remained seated, a faint smirk curling his lips. A dangerous glint flashed in his eyes. "You really thought you were clever? You're just another pawn in this game. Don't make me get rough." Linda fell silent. A shiver ran through her shoulders. I sipped from a cup of cold coffee, my eyes locked on the screen. Her words from the night before echoed in my head. "Even Mark. He's stopped calling you Dad." And I whispered to myself, "All right, Linda. Soon you'll learn who's really pulling the strings." On the 3rd day, I called the lawyer again. "I'm ready to go to court if necessary. I'm not signing anything." "Are you sure? It'll be a brutal fight." "Exactly. That's why I'm doing it. And I have an ace up my sleeve. One they'll never see coming." That night, Linda sat alone in the living room. Her face had lost all its triumph. Now there was only confusion and fear. The phone rang again and again. She didn't answer. From the stairs, Mark came down slowly. "Mom, where's Uncle Thomas?" he asked, his voice uncertain. Linda turned away, wiping at her tears. "He's not coming back, and you don't need him." Mark didn't reply, but his eyes were filled with doubt. I stared at the screen, rage swelling in my chest like a storm. But I held it in. This wasn't the time to strike. I picked up my phone, scrolled through the familiar numbers. When Brian answered, my voice was calm, but colder than ever. It's time. For both of them to learn who's really in control of this game. Linda sat curled up on the sofa, the pale blue glow of her phone screen casting ghostly shadows across her face. Her hair hung loose and tangled, like it hadn't been brushed in days. In the silence of the house, the ticking of the clock echoed endlessly, each tick-tock dragging her deeper into the storm of her fear. For 3 days straight, Linda had called the young man in the suit, draining her phone battery, but all she ever heard was the cold, robotic voice. "The number you have dialed is currently unavailable." Each hollow beep that followed cut through her chest like a blade. On her screen, anonymous messages appeared one after another, each word dripping poison into her mind. You really think he loves you? He's just waiting for you to lose everything, before he pulls the strings. You're about to lose it all, queen on the chessboard. Linda gripped her phone tighter, her hands shaking violently. Anxiety crept through her body, tightening her chest until she could barely breathe. Across the city, I sat in the small apartment I'd rented, my eyes locked on the laptop screen. There she was, pacing the living room, her footsteps frantic, like an animal cornered with nowhere to run. I sipped from a cup of cold coffee, a faint, icy smile tugging at my lips. In this game, there's only one winner. And this time, Linda. It's not you. That afternoon, my phone buzzed. It was the lawyer. Thomas, we've filed a motion to freeze the asset transfer. The court has agreed to review the entire settlement. She won't be able to sell the house until this is resolved. Good, I replied, my voice so calm it felt almost foreign to me. That night, Linda slumped into the chair, her trembling hands wrapped around a glass of wine. Her eyes were empty. Then, a faint click came from the corner of the room, the same corner where I'd hidden a camera. She stood slowly, her body tense, and walked toward the darkened corner. My heart pounded as I watched her on the screen. Linda crouched down, her shaking fingers brushing against the wall clock nearby. Then she stood, her tear-streaked face pale under the dim light. "I'm going insane," she whispered, her voice breaking. She sank back into the chair, burying her face in her hands. I let out a long, steady breath. That was close. From the stairs, Mark came down quietly, his innocent eyes filled with fear. "Mom, where's Uncle Thomas?" he asked softly, his voice barely above a whisper. Linda spun around, her eyes red and wild, her voice cutting through the silence like glass. "He's not your father. You need to understand that. He was never more than a stand-in. Someone I used to fill the emptiness. And now he's gone, just like everyone else." Mark froze, his small hands clutching his shirt tightly. His lips quivered, but no sound came out. I watched the scene unfold on my screen, my chest tightening like a vice. There was a time when I dreamed of a family, when I believed Linda and Mark were my whole world. But now, what I wanted wasn't love anymore. It was justice. My phone buzzed, a message from Brian. "The guy in the suit has drained her bank account. He's skipping town. He's done with her." I narrowed my eyes, my voice dropping into a low growl. "Linda, you thought you were clever, but you're nothing more than a pawn. Just like you once saw me." In the dark room, I placed my hand over my phone, my voice calm, but cold enough to freeze the air. "Linda, we need to meet. This time, you're going to listen." Linda walked into the small cafe, her face pale and drawn, her hair a tangled mess hanging loose around her shoulders. When she saw me sitting alone at the back table, she froze. Her eyes flickered, a mix of anger and fear. I looked up, my cold gaze locking onto hers. "Sit down," I said calmly, my voice steady but sharp enough to cut like a blade. Linda took a deep breath, then slowly walked over to the chair across from me. She dropped her handbag on the table, her voice hoarse, but still clinging to a shred of pride. "What do you want? Trying to act tough now? Trying to beg me to stay?" I shook my head slightly, a faint, cold smile touching my lips. "Linda, you still think you're the one pulling the strings? Even now, you believe you've won?" Linda let out a dry, bitter laugh. "You think your little anonymous messages could break me? You're still the same weak man you've always been, Thomas. Even Mark, he doesn't see you as his father." A sharp pain shot through my chest, but this time, I didn't let Linda see even the slightest crack in my face. I pulled a USB drive from my pocket and set it gently on the table, my voice dropping low. "Watch this. Then you'll understand. Who's really weak here?" Linda froze for a moment, her eyes narrowing in suspicion. She snatched the USB, plugged it into her phone. On the screen, a video played. The young man in the suit held another woman in his arms. He kissed her gently on the forehead, his voice soft and sweet. But not for Linda. 60% of the house money? Don't worry, my love. I've cleaned up that mess. She'll be left with nothing soon." Linda's hands trembled violently, her phone shaking as she clutched it. Her already red eyes widened, her lips quivering as if to speak, but no words came out. No, no, this can't be. He loved me. He said he'd give me everything. Her voice cracked, fragile and broken, like a child who just lost everything that mattered. I sat there in silence, my unblinking eyes locked on her. Do you understand now? You were nothing more than a pawn. Just like you once saw me as a pawn. You thought you were smart enough to control the game. But the truth is, you never even held the pieces. Linda covered her face with her hands, her muffled sobs spilling into the quiet cafe. I stood, pulling on my coat, my voice low and thunderous. I don't want the house. I don't care about the money. But Mark, he will not grow up drowning in your lies. Linda looked up, her tear-streaked face pale and trembling. Thomas, did you plan all of this? I paused at the door, turning my head one last time. From the moment you thought you were clever enough to outsmart me. That night, I drove back to the house. Mark was sitting on the front steps, his little eyes swollen and red. Dad, he whispered, his voice thick with tears. I knelt down, pulling my son into a tight embrace. A single hot tear slid down my cheek, falling onto his soft hair. Behind the doorway, Linda stood motionless, her eyes vacant, her voice a faint whisper swallowed by the darkness. Thomas, you've won. But what's left for me now? I sat on the front steps, Mark's head resting gently on my shoulder. His tiny hands clutched my shirt tightly, as if afraid I'd disappear again. His breathing was soft, but every now and then a small sob broke the stillness of the night. Behind me, the door remained shut. Where was Linda? Was she still curled up in the dark somewhere? The way I used to be, when she turned her back on me and walked toward another man. The next morning, Linda didn't leave her room. Mark and I sat at the table in silence, the faint clinking of knives and forks echoing in the thick, suffocating air. Dad, Mark whispered, his tearful eyes fixed on his plate of toast. Can I stay with you forever? His question twisted a knife in my chest. I placed my hand on his small shoulder, giving it a gentle squeeze. You'll always have me, son. No matter where we are, I'll never leave you again. Mark nodded, but a single tear slid down his cheek. By noon, Linda emerged from her room. She wore a wrinkled shirt, her hair tangled, her face pale and hollow. Her swollen eyes still held a flicker of pride, but it was faint, fading fast. You're planning to take him away, aren't you? Linda's voice was hoarse, but each word still cut like a blade. I stood, facing her squarely, my voice low and steady. You thought I'd disappear, didn't you? But I'm still here. Not for the house, not for the money. I stayed. For Mark. Linda let out a bitter, dry laugh. You think you're noble now? Fine. You win. But when Mark grows up and learns the truth, he'll hate you. He'll see how you humiliated his mother. A sharp pain tightened my chest, but my gaze remained calm and unwavering. You're wrong, Linda. One day, Mark will understand who truly cared for him and who didn't. Linda froze, her shoulders trembling, but her voice, though cracking, still lashed out. I wanted to destroy you, but it turns out I destroyed myself. I bent down, grabbing the handle of my suitcase. Linda stood by the doorway, her eyes vacant, her voice breaking. Thomas, you'll never understand how terrifying it was to see you in control of everything. I deserve this punishment, but Mark, he doesn't deserve this. I stopped in my tracks, my hand gripping the suitcase handle so tight my knuckles turned white. I turned, locking eyes with her, my voice deep and resolute. We'll talk. This time, there will be no more lies. But Linda, do you even deserve forgiveness? Linda sat slumped on the floor, her back against the wall, eyes blank as they stared into nothingness. Soft, strangled sobs broke from her throat, hoarse and thin, like her voice was dissolving into the air. Thomas, she whispered, her tone fragile, as if it might shatter. Did you ever really love me? Or from the very start? Did you just choose me because you were afraid of being alone? I stood silent for a moment, then answered slowly, I loved you with all my heart, but maybe you taught me something. We can't truly love someone else until we learn to love ourselves first. Linda covered her face with trembling hands, her shoulders shaking violently. The next day, as I packed my bags, Linda stood leaning against the doorway, her face pale and exhausted, her eyes still flickering with an inner struggle. Thomas, if I asked for one more chance, would you believe I could change? Her voice quivered. I looked deep into her eyes. There was a time when those eyes held my entire world, but now they were just a blurred memory fading in my heart. I believe you can change, but not for me, and certainly not to pull me back. Linda nodded faintly, her lips pressed tight to hold back a sob. Before stepping into the car, I turned to look at her one last time. You once called me weak, but Linda, I was never stronger than the moment I learned to let go. Linda broke down, her sobs echoing through the doorway. Take care of Mark for me. Don't let him carry the weight of his mother's mistakes. I gave a small nod, saying nothing more. Mark held my hand tightly, his eyes following his mother, until the car rolled away, dry leaves swirling on the quiet road. In the months that followed, Mark and I built a new life in a small coastal town. Each morning, we made breakfast together. Every afternoon, we rode bikes under the swaying palm trees, his laughter ringing out, slowly lifting the heaviness from my heart. One evening, as we watched the sun dip below the horizon, Mark asked softly, Dad, do you ever feel sad about Mom? I stayed silent for a moment, then gently ruffled his hair. I do, but I've learned something. Forgiveness isn't about giving others peace. It's about giving it to ourselves. Mark nodded, his wide eyes glimmering with a quiet, tender light. One afternoon, while sitting on the beach, a message popped up on my phone from an unknown number. Thomas, thank you for not destroying me when you could have. I've met with the lawyers. The papers are finalized. You have full custody of Mark. I'm leaving for a while to learn how to become a better person. I read the message over and over, a strange feeling rising in my chest. It wasn't satisfaction. It wasn't pain. Just relief, as if a weight I'd carried for years had finally been lifted. Mark and I stood on the beach, his tiny footprints trailing in the wet sand. Waves whispered softly, the salty breeze carrying something gentle, something lighter. Some people come into our lives to teach us how to love, and some leave to teach us how to love ourselves. I took a deep breath and smiled. For the first time in so long, it was a smile untouched by pain. I used to think that to get over pain, I had to erase everything. But the harder I tried to forget, the clearer it all became. The more I tried to push the memories away, the deeper they carved themselves into me. There were moments when I picked up my phone, typed out a message to Linda, "Are you doing okay?" But then, I deleted it. Not out of anger, not out of hate, but because I finally understood. Her life no longer has anything to do with mine. And what I need to focus on now is myself, and the little boy whose hand I hold every single day. I once loved her so deeply that I lost myself. I thought if I loved enough, if I endured enough, she would stay. But love isn't about holding on too tight. It's about freedom. It's about knowing when to hold on and when to let go. Today, as I stand on the beach, watching Mark run and play, his tiny footprints dotting the wet sand, I feel a strange sense of peace. The waves still whisper, the breeze still carries the taste of salt. But now it brings something softer, something lighter. Some people come into our lives to teach us how to love. Some leave to teach us how to love ourselves. And maybe, just maybe, there's someone out there waiting for us to arrive, this time with a whole heart, no longer patched together with old scars. For the first time in years, I take a deep breath, and I smile, a smile untouched by bitterness.